I've not talked to Mr. Kennedy in a number of years, actually. I think what he is saying about the food industry is exactly correct.
Okay, exactly correct. Bernie Sanders is one of one. He's going to call it the way he sees it. He really doesn't care who he offends. He doesn't care. And so you're going to see that clip, though, repurposed over and over again, spread by people pushing RFK forward, suggesting Bernie is 100% behind Kennedy. Of course, that's not the case. So let's go ahead and burst their bubble, shall we? Inoculate you against the false claim. Here's the rest of Senator Sanders on RFK Jr.
I think you have a food industry concerned about their profits, could care less about the health of the American people. I think they have to be taken on. I think, on the other hand, when Mr. Kennedy talks about taking fluoride out of our water system, I think what the scientific community will tell you that would be a disaster in terms of dental health in this country. His views on vaccine are in very wrong in so many ways. So we will see how the process unfolds. So I think what he's saying about the food industry makes sense to me. A lot of other things that he's saying are extremely dangerous.
I mean, what's not to love? Okay. What's not to love? A bit schizophrenic, you might think, when you hear Bernie Sanders go from exactly correct to extremely dangerous, if you will, damaging. But it makes sense. He's taking it policy by policy, idea now, we should say, not yet policy by idea. And let's talk a little bit about some of what RFK Jr. has promised. He's outlined a number of promises to make America healthy again. See how they did that? Maha. Okay. That's what they did. It's look, the marketing with these people is stunning. Okay. The deception, okay, the fraud and the sheer evilness is another matter, but the marketing's on point. This under President-elect Donald Trump, he's vowing to combat an epidemic of chronic diseases that he has described as an existential threat to America's future. That statement to CBS News. All are under the banner of fighting what Kennedy sees as a common thread behind a broad swath of ailments that Americans have been mass poisoned by big pharma and big food, and that federal agencies have failed to stop it. In response, he has also floated a number of specific policies to remake the federal government's public health institutions. Last September, Kennedy said, quote, "I'm going to urge President Trump on day one to do the same thing they did in COVID." Let's see, he's not referring to what Trump did in COVID, I hope, okay? Because if he had his way, remember, we would have injected bleach and not worn masks, and well, a lot of people died. So much so that they needed refrigerated trucks in New York to hold all the bodies. I think he means in solving the whole COVID situation ultimately, we'll see. But he says the same thing they did in COVID, which is to declare a national emergency, but not for infectious disease, but for chronic disease. Again, Brett, Senator Sanders is spot on, okay? We're not being protected by the Food and Drug Administration. We are being pumped full of chemicals because the powerful lobbyists in the beverage industry and processing food industry are paying people to keep us unhealthy. It's like this perpetual cycle with the health industry reaping the benefits and bean counters and insurance companies. All of it is a vicious cycle. So Senator Sanders, I think, is brave and right, as we often look to him to be, to say, look, he's right. We got to get rid of this. What do you make, though, of under this McDonald's, KFC, Taco Bell loving incoming president, that this is actually going to happen? A cleaner food industry, fresher vegetables, and no more food deserts, perhaps, under a Donald Trump presidency?
I mean, food deserts are going to be very difficult to handle, just because that takes a lot of infrastructure investment to like get food to people. And the others, but like, okay, what do you as an American want? Is a great question to ask yourself, especially when you're engaging with online discourse. What do you want? Do you want to feel right and have your team beat the other team? Or do you want stuff, right? Do you want things to happen? Are you looking at your value system and saying, like, I don't care what team it's on, I want this thing? Now, Republicans always play like these tricks to get you to actually join their team because of the four things that are very non-Republican that they put out there and put beacons on and be like, don't worry, it's safe. Okay. For Bernie Sanders, he's like, I want the food to be safe. And this guy is RFK, who's a weirdo. RFK, it's like the ultimate internet thing, right? Where it's like libertarians. You talk to them for 5 minutes, you're like, that is interesting. You talk to them for 20 minutes, you're like, you're the craziest person I've ever met in my entire life. You're bat balls crazy. That's RFK. So if we, as people who want things and not to be like, have our team win, if you want those things, RFK is actually potentially a conduit to getting those things like safe food, nutritious food, right? However, RFK is going to be like, thank you for coming along here. Can we please stop vaccines? And meanwhile, Trump's calculus is this: he doesn't care. He's going to advocate for the healthiest America possible. And as you say, Sharon, going to basically mainline special sauce. He doesn't care. All he cares about is galvanizing internet-y people to become active voters. These are people that were like, I don't know, I'm watching cat videos. Then they get pulled into like this weird RFK wellness craze. The bad side of that, wellness, in Trump's opinion, he's not gonna give you universal health care. He's gonna give you like free crystals or something. But like the focus that people need to have is like, do you want stuff? Then say, this is what I want. I want the food to be safer. I want to fight corrupt lobbyists who throw millions of dollars into giving me maltodextrose pectin injections instead of like jam.
There it is. And, it's interesting because we should mention, you said, Trump's going to do what Trump's going to do. He doesn't care. He does care about a couple of things because Maha, he's made clear, is only going to go so far. Hands off. It does have limits. The president-elect has listed oil and gas as one of the off-limits issues for Kennedy. In the past, Kennedy has been critical of big oil, natural gas over the fatal toll of fossil fuel pollution, climate change. Again, these are things that impact every American. They impact people globally. It's killing people, literally. It is. But dear leader says, hands off. We're not even going there. I'll let you play over there in the sandbox, but not this. Several of Kennedy's ideas would require, we should mention, presidential or congressional action to implement. It is possible, though, that they could be supercharged by emergency powers. But look for Bernie, of course, being the independent guy that he is, to shout down things that he does not agree with, bolster things that he does. After all, Bernie is still Bernie. Here's how he ended the interview.
Over the years, I do not know his other picks, so I'm going to have to sit down and talk with him. The other thing I think that's important is Trump over the years, and Kennedy himself, has talked about as a health problem the fact that we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. And if I'm not mistaken, Kennedy has talked about the need for Americans not to pay more than the people in other countries. I think that's exactly right. And I hope Trump keeps his word in terms of going forward in something that he has talked about for years, substantially lowering the cost of prescription drugs in this country.
All right, so he doesn't care. As we said, whether you like Bernie or not, he's going to do what he thinks is in the best interest of the American people. He's going to speak truth to power. Ultimately, another way of putting it is Bernie Sanders gives zero F's about what people think about him. I'm going to toss it to you for the last word, Brett, but I hope that given the division and the wackadoodle things that have happened politically this year alone, that perhaps the Bernie Sanders of the world, AOC, can capture the Democratic Party, who Bernie Sanders has no problem speaking up against, and move it in a direction that perhaps will resonate with everyday working Americans to perhaps enhance their lives, start a movement, if you will, where people who were on opposite ends of the spectrum, perhaps MAGA over here, wrongly, I think, and others who are, far left and not always in the right position either, will come together and say, you know what, we can get behind this leadership because everybody else is all over the place and owned by lobbyists.
I'd love that. the tough stuff about like regulations when it comes to what Bernie was talking about and what you were kind of saying is like the regulations that like oil and gas type stuff that like that's what Trump is actually effective at. He's effective at rolling back those regulations. So at the same time that he's got someone like RFK out there, RFK, who is a weirdo, man. Like he's just a weirdo. And he's not, I mean, if he can get in there into the belly of the beast and make it so that food's safer, would love it. I have zero confidence in that. And he is more, he is more, he's tilted his, lance against basically his personal grudges, which are like chronic disease and vaccines. He's going to put way more effort into that, I think. And I hope he proves me wrong. But at the same time, Donald Trump is going to, at the other side of his mouth, empower oil, gas, industry, major polluters that cause cancer and other chronic diseases. Like basically he's saying like, I'm going to, I've empowered RFK to end all chronic diseases, except the ones caused by the pollutants that my industry buddies are chucking into the atmosphere, the rivers and the lakes.
Yeah. They'll be behind closed doors and doing, what they do and saying, I'm going to make you even richer. Don't worry, I gotcha. How can you grease the wheels of the Trump family? It's all going to stay the same, but perhaps inch by inch, it'll happen.
Members make a difference here at TYT. You help make the show happen, and we see you in the chat with your loyalty badge. Click the join button to become a member today.